Hey everybody, how y'all doing? It's Carm here, back with a new video. It's been a little while, it's a couple weeks. Just been doing a lot of listening lately to stuff I've already had in my collection. I haven't really been buying much new music, so I thought I'd add another second to my series of forgotten and revisited finds, which I'd started, I guess, around my third video. Hadn't done any since. Yeah, just a few things I've been listening to, little stack here. So I'll just start right in. Something I've had for probably about 10 years now, I'd say. Celestial Vibration through Edward Larry Gordon, better known as Laraji. Fantastic zither player, some electronics on here. This is from the SWN label, the private press. Swan might stand for, from 1978. Thinking of Chris, if you're watching JC68, brother Chris here in the Chicago area, you may have this one. Beautiful record, really diverse range of sounds, sometimes percussive, sometimes drone based, a lot of silence. Really a fantastic album. I believe it's his first in general and the only one done under his own name, his given name. So highly recommended to anyone who's interested in music that definitely reaches the further bounds of just sonic interest. This one I'd pretty much forgotten that I'd had. John Sermon, Anglo Sax, Jazz Alto. Fantastic record from 1969 on DRAM. Record's in great condition too. Had this for quite a few years, probably since maybe early 2000s. And it's really two aspects of what I guess he was doing at the time. Or I'm not even sure how much he was doing, like standards, and this actually has kind of a Latin sound to it. The side one in particular, and side two is an original composition, like a 3-part suite. You can see some of the musicians on there. Kind of a who's who of the British scene of the time. Fantastic album, fantastic playing by everyone involved, and I'm still amazed at all these years listening to his baritone sax playing, just how fluid it is and the range. You know, you can get it up as high as really an alto. So, well, jazz alto, it's fitting there. Mike Osborne, actually, speaking of alto sax, is on side one. Another fantastic player. So highly recommended if you're a Sermon fan or just the scene in general of the time. Anthony Braxton, New York, fall 1974. He's an old favorite of mine. Primarily alto sax, and most of the other reed instruments, saxophones and clarinets. And on here he just plays a variety of contexts, some traditional jazz quartet stuff. There's a saxophone quartet. There's a duo with Richard Teitelbaum on Moog synthesizer. And see some of the musicians on here: Kenny Wheeler, trumpet; Dave Holland, bass; Jerome Cooper, drums; Julius Hemphill, alto sax; Oliver Lake on sax; Hamid Blewett, baritone sax; Leroy Jenkins, violin. So yeah, just kind of a cross selection of just what he was doing at the time. Also, you know, with some of the early AACM musicians. And this would probably be a good start if you're curious about Anthony Braxton, want to get into his music. This is from the Arista label from the time. Yeah, it's a good start to his music because you could get a little bit of everything of what he was doing back then and, in a way, what was to come. And I was always intrigued by his compositions. You can see if that shows up. He had his own little code he devised for titles. So definitely, one of the most original artists that I'm aware of in this kind of music or any other. And still around, still composing and playing. George Russell Sextet, featuring Jan Garbarek. Trip to Prilaguri. This has some members of Garbarek's first album, Afric Pepperbird. Terje Ripdahl, guitar. Jan Christensen, drums. Harold Anderson bass. This is your George Russell's compositions, I believe, for the most part. Jan Garbarek does a couple tunes also. More of a traditional setting, like straight ahead jazz setting. I know, I think Chris Cole and maybe a couple others were showing another George Russell album. So he's someone I need to listen more from. But this is nice hearing this after quite a few years. I think I've had this since the 90s, late 90s, which by then I was already pretty heavily into ECM, so it was nice to hear another side of it, these musicians. This is a long time album I've had, excuse me, Nexus, Ragtime Consort. This is Nexus was a percussion ensemble made up mostly of marimbas and xylophones. Some members of this composer Steve Reich's ensemble from the late 70s or mid 70s. I think this is from 77 or 78. And yeah, they're just playing ragtime music on here. It's kind of a cartoony feeling at times. It's really a lot of fun. And this is also a direct-to-disc recording, meaning they bypass tape in the recording process. They just record it straight onto the master disc. You see there's the cutting engineer there. So for that alone, it's pretty interesting. I believe it's a limited edition, but I don't know if it was reissued or not. But if you see it somewhere, definitely pick it up if you like, ragtime music or percussion in general. This is probably more of a recent find of this pile, and by recent I mean maybe in the last 4 years I picked this up. Michael Rouse, Broken Consort, Jade Tiger. The closest comparisons I'd say would be to, as far as, it's very minimalist, kind of in the style of Philip Glass and Steve Reich from 1983. It's a quartet of saxophone, keyboards, electric bass, and percussion. And yeah, it's very minimal, very repetitive, and a bit of a challenging listen, but although actually quite pleasant. It doesn't get, it's repetitive but not too monotonous. And yeah, just something different hearing these particular instruments playing in that manner. So I'd recommend it if you like those composers I mentioned before. This is an old favorite and just a fantastic trio album. I guess you could call it a power trio album. Power Tools, Bill Frisell guitar, Melvin Gibbs bass, and the late great Ronald Shannon Jackson on drums, who in particular his performance on here is really good. Basically recorded live in the studio from 1987. No overdubs, no remixing, just a real nice raw session, a lot of variety, and yeah, just great playing. Just love this album, and I don't know why I haven't listened to it more in recent years. One I hadn't forgotten about, but I just hadn't heard it in a while, so it was very fresh sounding after all this time. This is a beautiful keyboard duet album, Moonflower Ascending by Sheila Roberts and Jim Reeder. It's piano and analog and digital synthesizers. Quite romantic music from 1985 on Message Box Music Company. Never heard of that particular label. Yeah, really nice, romantic, impressionistic. Again, not too syrupy, but it's at times it almost, to me, on the second side, sounds like prog at times. Just the way the keyboards. It's improvisational too. So yeah, if you like that sort of thing, I would recommend this. I haven't seen it around in other formats, so I'm not quite sure how rare it is. But it's a pretty nice one. Let's see, I have a couple more here. Oh yes. Albert Eiler. Prophecy. A live date from 1964. Amazing free jazz sax player. Played mostly tenor. Someone who's been so influential upon improvisers, composers, people interested in just the instrument itself. This has Gary Peacock and Sonny Murray, bass and percussion respectively. And we recorded right around the time of Spiritual Unity, which I believe is Eiler's best known record. And yeah, just his playing is just so powerful. I think I read it was an interview with someone who also passed away recently, Amiri Baraka. I think he was speaking of Eiler and said something along the lines of his records weren't records, they were rumors, or something like that. Just how powerful his live playing was, that his records barely hinted at, you know, just what he could do with his playing. So yeah, it does give a little glimmer of what he did, and yeah, just a very powerful sound, and no one quite like that, you know, then or now. So yeah, I recommend it if you're interested in the furthest reaches of jazz and improvised music. Let's see, Louis Andriessen, I believe a Dutch composer. I think it might have been affiliated in some way with Misha Mengelberg from ICP Orchestra. I think I had heard something about that. Yeah, from it's born in 1939. This is from This album's from 1981. And yeah, it's not a whole lot of information. Yeah, recorded 1981. It's kind of like a chamber, has some percussion, some harp, sounds like glockenspiel maybe, strings and voices. A very kind of droning, sustained mood throughout, with the occasional quite heavy crescendo of like cymbals and brass. But it's a very simple cover. Yeah, very beautiful, kind of moody album. And you know, so it wasn't very expensive when I got it. I found it sometime in the early 2000s. But yeah, if you're into experimental classical, you know, 20th century classical, I definitely would recommend it. And, yeah, the dynamic contrast is what really struck me about the album. This is an absolute beautiful, beautiful album. Spun it a couple times last night, and it was just gorgeous. Osama Kitajima, Japanese multi-instrumentalist, plays guitars, keyboards, koto. On here, also joined by harp and see lyricon, which is a electronic woodwind instrument played by Richard Elliott. Let's see, from 1986. I believe it's on CBS label. Yeah, CBS label. Really nice stuff. Just very beautiful, impressionistic, East meets West, acoustic and electronic, perfect blend of that kind of music. Almost anything I hear by him, you know, it's so diverse what he does, and some of the stuff he did around this time, you know, is a little cheesy. You know, you could tell, definitely identified as the 80s, but this one is just, to me, is a masterpiece and just absolutely beautiful. 3 long compositions, and just yeah, the first piece is called Heaven Sent, and it's just you know, fits the title perfectly, and the cover as well. So I highly recommend this. And finally, album Distant Drums by Brian Slauson, percussionist. Really neat cover too. You see there. From 1990 or 89, 1988. I bought this album for one song that I'd heard off the radio show Musical Starstreams, like around 1990, 91. And the rest of the album is pretty decent, although it's a little, I don't know, it's like he tries a little too hard to be eclectic, like throwing as much in as possible. But it's interesting hearing him kind of adapt himself to different contexts within the album. But yeah, the one song is called Drums by Chance. That's the one I bought the album for. But it was worth it just for that. You know, it wasn't very expensive. And yeah, if you're interested in kind of a mixed bag on one album, you know, this would be a good thing to find. I think that's it for the records. Thing that's playing right now. Another thing I'd heard on Starstreams way back when, you know, probably around 8th grade or freshman year of high school. Purple Sails by Shiho, a Japanese composer, synthesist, on the Hearts of Space label. 1989, I think this came out. Yeah, beautiful stuff. Very, you know, times romantic, and just paints a lot of pictures of just various moods. As far as I know, this is the only album she ever made that I could find, you know, as far as titles. Maybe did some production work later. I'm not quite sure. But I'd recommend this. You could probably find it online pretty cheap. You know, I've had this for a long time. But yeah, I'd recommend it if you like someone like Kitaro even. So, I think that'll do it for this time. Just wanted to share some some revisited finds, and I have a couple other stacks I've been kind of going through, as well as some the VCLT that Andrew sent. You know, I want to go through some more of those again as well. Just get them all together and just get a little downtime from work now, so I could just have more time to just listen. And it's quite cold and snowy out. In fact, I'll have to do some shoveling afterwards, I think. But so I'll just have more time to listen and just keep sharing these with you when I can. So I hope you're all doing well, and until next time, peace, love, and joy.